Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
2019 is the first year that the majority of the college-educated workforce will be women. And according to the U.S. Department of Education, more than 57% of the class of 2018 who graduated with bachelor's degrees were female. The gap for master's degrees was even wider, 59% to 41%. Despite all of this, somewhat counterintuitively, the more educated women become, the larger the pay discrepancy between them and their male counterparts. Today, we've got a lot to break down, and we are very fortunate to be joined by none other than Olivia Jackson, who is a certified athletic trainer for the Cleveland Clinic, working on a doctorate in athletic training from Indiana State University. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And in case everybody can't figure it out, she is the offspring of none other than
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Yeah, folks, she's got all the smarts and she's got a lot better thoughts than I do. So I'll have to just turn it over to her today.
Okay.
Get her perspectives.
Gotcha.
You know mine, but she's pretty sharp. She's pretty sharp cookie.
So a couple different reasons you could care. I mean, you know, if you're a woman, you might care based on that pay discrepancy that we've been talking about, especially if you're a woman like Olivia who is pursuing one of those higher degrees, indicating that the better degree she gets, the wider the discrepancy. So you could definitely care because of that. And you could care from a male perspective for sure if you're all about, moving the female agenda forward or the societal agenda forward. But you could also care because what does it mean if there's less men going to college and how that will change the workforce as a whole. So a lot of different things to look at, but we're going to start today with an article in the review section of the Wall Street Journal entitled, "A Good Man is Getting Even Harder to Find." And that's actually where some of those stats that I just shared came from, and the U.S. Department of Education. But the article goes on to explain that every year, the pool of eligible male graduates is getting smaller relative to the number of women. Now, of course, college isn't everything, and many women will find a perfect mate who hasn't been through the 4-year playground of parties, sleeping, and the occasional lecture. But the reality is that more of them are going to have to if they want a meaningful relationship. So there's several different components of this that come into play. And I guess I want to find out both from Lance and Olivia, which one to them is the most interesting, because you've got the workforce component of what does it mean if there's more women than men with college degrees, but you've also got the family component and the relationship component to what does it mean for somebody like Olivia who's pursuing these higher educational goals and probably, not necessarily, but probably will look for a mate that is, similar in educational attainment or maybe in career choice or something like that. So, there's a lot of different ways you could look at this, but which one to you stands out, Lance?
Well, for me, and Olivia and I have talked about this before, but I kind of shared something this morning with her, and it's like, as the father of 2 daughters, I raised them to be independent and smart and be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And they both are very career driven and career oriented. And I've wondered at times, did I do the right thing? Because they're not necessarily the stereotypical female in their lifestyles and what they've chosen to do. But at the same time, I see a lot of their friends who have already been married once and now they're divorced and they have children they're taking care of and they're in another relationship. And while everybody's free to live their life the way they want to, it's like, well, is that really a better situation? And so, we've talked about how no matter how you decide to live your life, there's good and bad on both sides. And that's kind of why that part of it is like, okay. But this whole idea of you're going to go out there and get more education and you're going to try to better yourself, then it does make a difference as to how people are going to perceive you. And I think that's something we need to work on with people who are going to do that, especially females, because then they run into people that either A, don't respect them because of what they have done, or they're intimidated by that. And they shouldn't be. Why should we praise guys who go out and do this kind of stuff? And we kind of, as a society, at least my generation, I felt like we look down upon that. And we need to raise that up and say, these are goals that you should try to achieve, not only as men, but as females. And we should recognize it as a society, not get all wrapped up in gender. It's like, why is it okay for a guy to be 35 or 40 and a doctor and doing all this stuff and never gotten married? And everybody's like, oh, look at him. He's going after his career goals. And if it's a female, it's like, well, wait a minute. Why aren't you a housewife yet? Well, it's like, and maybe I'm being too simple, but I still feel like that's a feeling that's out there, because I get these questions like, well, are they married yet? No, they're not married. They're doing their thing, man. They're making a difference in the world. They're helping people. They're doing this. Why are you so wrapped up in what their personal life is?
Sorry.
Would you be wrapped up in their personal life if they were a guy?
I'm laughing because it's just the Lance raging against the machine.
Sorry.
No, it's that's what our listeners have come to expect, nothing less.
We should be independent thinkers who are out there trying to make the world a better place.
So, Olivia, question. Having been through the higher education system recently, and of course now, in the workforce and pursuing further degrees, have you seen any change in the social contract? Do you feel like, and what I mean by that is, if you are going to go sit down with a male colleague, to, talk about something or just have a meal, is there still that immediate insinuation that, maybe something, there's something more going on there? Or do you feel like that has started to fade away some, and it's okay for you to just go do that without fearing, not that you would fear specifically, but just women in general, without being concerned that society might be making those judgments of you?
For me personally, and again, this is just my personal experience, I don't have any issues with that. I've been very fortunate that my male colleagues have always, for the most part, been very respectful and appreciative of the knowledge and the contribution that I bring to the workplace. And so those discussions are almost always very collaborative. I have had some male colleagues and superiors who have had issue with my role as a female in my profession, which is interesting because my profession, athletic training, actually is majority women now. It was, we started athletic training in 1950 and it was all male. And it wasn't until the 1970s that women were sitting for our certification exam. And now we are over more than half, or like 51% of our profession now. And that's a very, very short amount of time. So I think I'm pretty fortunate in my profession because it's healthcare. And so for the most part, people just want to be taken care of, especially, we work with active populations, and those individuals really don't mind whether you're male or female. But I know that is still out there for a lot of women in a lot of other professions.
So what about this notion a good man is getting even harder to find? I mean, you're making your way in life. You're doing your own thing. Have you felt any pressure? And has that varied based on geography relative to, like, quote unquote, why are you still single?
Yes. And yes.
Okay.
So yes, I have felt pressure. I think I felt more pressure and got more pressure in my early to mid 20s. As opposed to my early 30s, where I am now.
Why do you think that changed?
I think there are a lot of people who look at me now and say, oh, she's just not going to get married. I'm older. I think and I'm not old by any sense of the word, but it's more expected for someone in their early to mid, even late 20s to be actively looking for a life partner. And not to say that I wasn't, I was, but.
And you're not now.
Not actively. I mean, okay. I'm open to the possibility, but I am not on dating apps or anything like that. It has not been a healthy construct for me. Just men being mean and hateful for no reason. And for me personally, it's not a productive route to go about finding a life partner. So I just focus on, I have made an active choice to focus on other parts of my life. But yes, I think we do get pressure of, why aren't you married? Why aren't you dating? Well, you should just try those apps. And then I tell people, like, these men were mean to me. Like, they were criticizing me for things that were not even valid or important. And I don't need that in my life. And they're like, well, that's just what you kind of have to do. That's just what you have to put up with if you want to find somebody. And I'm like, then it's not worth finding somebody.
What's Dad think about that?
Amen. No, I mean, it's, I don't understand why people try to put other people in a box to live a certain way. You should live the way that you want to live. If that means you want to have somebody, a significant other, fine. If it means you want to have a specific type of relationship, then that's fine. Why can't we just leave each other alone and let us all live the life the way we do? Because if you, and we're not here to study it, but if you study, quote, marriages, all marriages are different. I mean, even the healthy ones, it takes, and there's nothing, why is it wrong? Why do we look down or kind of squish up our faces if people don't do what is the norm? If the person is happy and they're doing what they want to do, and that's what should be important. I mean, life's too short to get wrapped up into societal norms. It's get out there and do the things you want to do. And if that's what you want to do, that's great. But if it's not, we shouldn't be judgmental and look down on people. Well, you're not doing what everybody else is. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, I've spent my whole life doing that is go out there and do what you want to do and chase the dreams and live the lifestyle that you want to live. And why do you want to do what society does and then be unhappy?
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, how many, what is it? Is it still more than 50% of marriages end in divorce? So, wow, I'm glad everybody went out and spent, and again, it's not about money, but how, spend all that money and get married and da-da-da-da.
Well, and then spend all that money to,
and then you bring kids,
break up.
You bring kids in the world and you put them in the school system, and I got to deal with them because have all kinds of emotional problems because mom and dad don't get along, or mom and dad are divorced, and there's all this and everything else. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. And I wish more people would be a little more involved in making those decisions.
Next up, we're talking about the pay gap, and specifically the counterintuitive nature of the more advanced degrees that women seek, the wider the discrepancy between them and their male counterparts. So plenty more to talk about. But Lance, before we move on to that, all the shows on the network are pursuing a common goal, right? Which is why we're talking about this today.
Yep.
And what is that?
Well, we're doing our mission statement, aren't we?
I think so.
Okay.
You tell me.
Well, you try not to call it that. But
you're the co-host, right?
Right.
So,
well, this is my part.
Okay.
True Chat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. I just like to make sure we get the mission statement in there.
I know. You got to get it in, right? So get it in early and often. Plenty more to come. Keep it right here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
According to the U.S. Department of Education, more than 57% of the class of 2018 who graduated with bachelor's degrees were female. The gap for master's degrees was even wider, 59% to 41%. Now, with that, you might think that means that females should be making more money or close to the same money as their male counterparts. But in fact, the opposite is true. The more college that females have, the wider the pay discrepancy. That's right. If you want to be paid close to what your male counterparts make, you're best off getting less than a high school diploma. Less than a high school diploma or a high school diploma. Both of those are about the same in terms of what you can expect to make. But once you get an actual college degree or an advanced degree, and the advanced degree is where it widens even further. With that, as we're looking at what's going on here, the article that we're now referencing is entitled Female College Grads to Reach Milestone. It's also from the Wall Street Journal, and you can follow along at thestateofus.org. We've got the articles linked there. And in fact, I heard Lance, I think you relayed to me, tell me if I'm wrong, that Olivia appreciated that we have now provided links to the articles so that people, and her specifically, can follow along with what we're...
As a longtime listener, she really is. She appreciates that technology piece that we put in a little while ago. So,
and I think you're pulling up the articles right now, aren't you?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
No, actually,
you're using your technology.
Yeah. I hit the one, but it's now a different one. So now I've got to figure out how to go back, but thanks for calling me out on the show.
You're welcome. I was just impressed. He's over here. He's doing the stuff. I'm not sure that it's working for him, but he's trying. So, the article explains with greater numbers, human resource departments are going to have to pay more attention to their female educated workers, according to Richard Fry, who's a senior researcher at Pew Research. He goes on to say, for example, there's evidence that female workers maybe more value flexible work arrangements. They may value more highly generous parental leave policies. Still, the majors that that women choose in college and their subsequent occupations remain heavily skewed, acting as a significant caveat for women's earning potential. So part of what's, I think, being highlighted here, and you tell me, Olivia, if your experience is the same, is part of this is you say advanced degrees, but one PhD is not necessarily the equivalent to another, nor is a doctor of athletic training necessarily equivalent to, say, a brain surgeon in terms of both what someone should expected to be paid, right? So part of this may have to do some with what degrees women are typically seeking.
I think that's fair. You know, in my case, I went into my profession knowing I wasn't going to make a lot of money, and I'm not going to school to get more money either.
So why are you going?
For me, the motivation was advancing myself and leading within my own practice as a way to advance our profession as our profession expands into outside of just secondary and collegiate athletics into other realms of patient care. And so it was a way to be on, it's a new degree. And so it was a way to be on the cutting edge of what's going on in my world as far as athletic training, the profession of athletic training goes. So I have people ask me all the time, why are you getting this doctorate? You know, you're not going to make more money. I'm like, I know. And I'm okay with that. I don't think anybody in my cohort would say that they went into this degree for more money. It's higher value than that for us.
You want to be the best athletic trainer you can be.
Correct. And I want to be eventually, I would like to take on leadership roles at the, you know, either local, state, regional, national level within the profession. So there are professional goals that I have that I believe this doctorate will help me, you know, to progress towards. But you know, I have students that I went to college with who got their bachelor's degree in accounting or petroleum engineering or communications, public relations. They haven't gone back to school since, you know, maybe a master's degree, and they're making double or triple, some of them, what I'm making. And I'm okay with that because I chose the profession that I chose
knowing that I wasn't going to make a lot of money. That's not what it's about for me. So I think the point that the article makes about what majors women are choosing is a big factor when you're looking at that pay gap as well.
So Lance, I see you've got the chart pulled up here and you're taking a look at this. At first glance, right? I mean, I think to most people listening, if we just said the more education you get, the wider the pay discrepancy, that sounds immediately like a real bad thing. Like what's going on? That doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, though, part of what we've just talked about and that I was speaking with Olivia about is this idea that some of it has to do with the fields that women are looking to get those higher degrees in.
That's part of it as well. Right. But I'm looking at it in this direction, and it's a third way. And that is, women who graduate with a high school diploma are making less than $20,000 a year. Women with a college education. So yeah, the discrepancy grows because women are making about $15,000 a year without a high school diploma. Men are making about $17,000 a year.
So it's pretty close.
So, and that was what you pointed out is, well, the less education, they're closer. Yes, the gap does widen, but women with college and then an advanced degree are pushing the $40,000 a year mark. Okay. Which one of the authors of this article, Nicole Smith, who's the chief economist at Georgetown University on education in the workforce, says, quote, "It is the culmination of a trend that started maybe over 40 years ago. It's going to give women a lot more earning potential. It's going to give them more control over their finances, more control over their own destiny." So while you're looking at, you pointed out correctly that the gap between men and women grow as women get education, but the pay increase that women get with the education is allowing them, as it's stated in the article, the chance to do things on their own and to not be dependent on someone else to do things. So there is a value, even though, as Olivia said, there's an intrinsic value to education, that you feel better about yourself. And it may open up other doors that you want to get, but there is also an economical advantage that allows you then to pursue the goals that you would like in your life.
More money, more flexibility.
Right.
For whatever that might be. Yes.
Can I just interject something here? I think the other point that is important to consider is that student loans are
a huge burden. And so if you're going to school for that long, you're going to have a lot of student loan payments to make. So that's going to take a lot of money, and also childcare. And childcare costs, which this article doesn't discuss, but childcare costs are something that should be taken into consideration, because if you're going to be a female working in the world, your childcare costs are going to take out a huge chunk of your paycheck every month. So if you're going to get all that education, you better be making a lot of money, because you're going to have a whole lot of student loans to pay off, and you're going to have a whole lot of childcare if you have a family, and childcare is a cost in your monthly budget.
Well, we're going to talk to some in the third segment of our show today about what kind of the expectations should be, some things around, the family unit and what that looks like today. Okay, so one thing I wanted to know, because Lance and I have discussed it on numerous occasions. And honestly, it's something I'm torn on. I've never felt good about my answer either way. The idea, and it's brought up a lot, equal pay for equal work, right? Good in principle. Sounds good in principle, but I want to know from a policy standpoint, would you be supportive of a law that would require such a thing? In other words, if I'm going to hire X female and X male, I can't take anything into account, but they must be paid the same. I don't have the flexibility to pay them differently, because this is something, again, the goal that we're trying to achieve. For me, I feel like, yes, based purely on gender. I don't want somebody to be paid differently for that reason. On the other hand, though, then are we handicapping employers by saying, well, they're going to run the risk of, if I hire this male who perhaps is more qualified and deserves therefore more money, now I cannot do that. And therefore I lose that candidate who's a better candidate because I'm required by law to pay the same money. And it can go the other way, but obviously the situation that we're primarily talking about is the male-female.
But how many times is a female who's more highly qualified than a male still paid less money? Because those stats are out there too.
Sure.
So, the perfect example is the U.S. women's national team for soccer. They get paid significantly less, and the powers that be are using sponsorships and other reasons, which some have some ground to them, that they get paid significantly less than the men's national team. And anybody who, if you're not into sports, the U.S. women's national soccer team has been way more successful more recently than the men's national team. So that's a big issue. But if you're asking my personal opinion, I think it's nuanced. I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. But from the female perspective, I know men that do the same job as me that I'm more qualified for from an educational and experiential perspective. And they make more money than I do.
So I guess the question is, do you feel that solving that is a matter of law or a matter of society?
I think society follows the law. So
you'd be supportive of a law that required.
I would be supportive of a very carefully and nuanced written law that would favor those tendencies.
The women's soccer team has always been more successful, and the jersey sales and the sponsorships are there, so therefore the money should follow. But culturally, I feel like sometimes men are afraid of the competition. They say they want competition, and then, well, I don't want women to make the money. But I think the biggest issue is more women need to continue, and they will, because of the education and everything else, they will continue to get into roles of leadership and break down these stereotypes that we look at gender as a reason as to why you should make money. And Olivia, you're making faces over at me. So what's your comment to this? You said something about like you agree with me fundamentally, but
I think if I were to use those, I agree with what he's saying, but if I were to use those words, I think it would be perceived differently.
Well, sure. But
why?
Doesn't make it right, but
which is wrong.
But it does mean
two people should be able to say the same thing and have the same meaning, and it shouldn't be stereotyped because one's coming from a male and one's coming from a female.
Right, but that happens all the time.
That's wrong. Just because that happens doesn't mean it's right.
When as Olivia pointed out, if she were to make the same statement you just made, it would be viewed differently. Just like you and I talk sometimes on episodes where we feel like it's not that we don't want to have a woman on the show, but we also feel like it's wrong that in order for what we're saying to have any credibility, that you have to have a woman on the show. And that's anything, whether it's
right.
male, female, or
if it comes from your viewpoint versus my viewpoint, then there's ageism. It's the old guy talking versus the young guy,
whatever.
And it shouldn't be. And it shouldn't be that way.
It's almost like it's worth saying our mission statement again, isn't it?
Right? Exactly.
So
that's why we're here.
In the last bit of the show,
trying to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
Boom.
And I'm trying to be as respectful as I can.
Trying.
But I get tired of people who are going to judge people.
You're doing your doodles, and that helps.
I know.
I think.
All right.
Don't you?
I don't know. You said I had a minute. I'm longer than a minute.
Well, that's why I said you have a minute. I figured that'd be our best hope. So the last bit of the show, we're going to talk about the future of what's to come and some of the societal trends moving forward. How should we be valuing the family? What's important in terms of perks that employers can offer? And we've kind of hinted at that already. So keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
With 2019 being the first year that the majority of the college-educated workforce will be women, one of the questions that comes into play is what can employers do to not only close the gender pay gap, but also to incentivize and attract women to these jobs. If there's more women in the workforce that are qualified for these jobs, and they're making up a larger segment now of the college-educated workforce, that changes some of the benefits, perhaps, and the packages that employers are going to offer to potential employees. So the question becomes, as we look at this, some of what was discussed in these articles, Olivia had an interesting way of looking at this for us. You want to tell us about that?
So the article talks about health benefits, or part of health benefits plans that are supposed to be more attractive to women. So more family time off, paying for, I think, freezing the eggs. Is that right? They were talking about that in the article. But my thought with all of that is that's wonderful, but we're missing out on a fundamental piece. That stuff to me is the fluff. It's the marshmallows. It's lightweight. It's sweet. It tastes good. It looks good, but it doesn't have any weight. The main point that we're missing in this article is that the United States is the only developed nation that doesn't have federally mandated full paid time off for family leave, male or female. We're the only ones. And without that, the rest of this is just fluff. It's just the marshmallows. It's just the sweet, sugary part that, ooh, look at this. It's enticing. It's look what we're trying to do for you. But on a federal level, we're missing the bar every time.
So, and I told you before the show, because I should try for our listeners' sake to play devil's advocate here. Two different things that come to mind. And one of them actually came up during the show, and this wasn't something I had thought about originally. The first one is the idea that, you don't get to be the leader by following. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best approach for us. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing either, but I'm not sure that that's the reason we should do anything. I mean, you said, I know that's hard to separate it from this issue because it's a guy telling a girl that, oh, well, they're not going to, follow on this thing. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that Lance and I try to talk about that on other stuff too, when everybody's like, and socialized healthcare is one of those things that's up right now. So just to share that it's not my viewpoint just on this, it's across the board. There's a lot of arguments out there that look at all these countries, look how happy they are and they have socialized medicine. So therefore socialized medicine's the answer. It's like, yeah, I'm not sorry. Doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. I just think that there's a better positioning for it. And then the second thing that I think is even more so this way is, doesn't putting things in like this in place suggest a switch from having children to be more of a privilege to having it become a right? And if it becomes a right, and maybe it is now, I mean, this is one of those things that's not well defined. From a governmental standpoint, whether or not you have the right to have children. And this to me then, if it becomes a right, if we put in place things like paid family leave, aren't we then actually adding pressure to single females that this is the course, that your employers are focused on offering things around making a family and not as focused on people that are single? Go ahead.
No.
You're making faces.
No, I don't think that it just opens the door for possibilities. If I, as a single woman, wanted to have a child right now, I would have a lot of obstacles to overcome. And having fully paid time off is a huge barrier that you would be taking down. And that's not just for single women. That's for women in all sorts of relationships. And when you said, you can't be a leader by following, are we leading? Because if you look at, you guys have said on the show before, you can see a lot of us about a society with the way that they treat their children and their elderly. And if we're not giving families and parents, just parents, the time without financial burden or with minimized financial burden to have that bonding time that has been scientifically proven, lots of evidence there, to be highly valuable, both fathers and mothers, that bonding time with newborns is essential in human development. And when you look at the gun violence problem we have in this country, the mental health crisis that we have in this country, the opioid crisis that we have in this country, are we leading in that area? Because I'd like to hear people, I'd like to hear other people's opinions out there on this, because we have this perception even from other nations. Other nations see this as like, hey, we don't want to go to the United States because we're afraid of these things that might happen to us and things like that. So are we really leading in that area? And if we had this mandated fully paid family leave time, which is different than, the laws that we have in place right now, we're prioritizing the parent-child relationship. We're prioritizing that work. We're not living to work. We're working to live. And I think we have a big issue with that in this country.
So if it's mandated, should the mandate require that paid time off, paid, family leave be equal for males and females?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I assume that was your answer. I just wanted to make sure that
yes, our
audience, well, it's not everybody's answer. So
I just don't see this as a socialized medicine issue.
No,
you brought up that at all. And I don't, is that,
I didn't mean it that way,
but we're going to, it's not, yeah, but it's not. And people are going to say, yeah, this shouldn't be part of Obamacare. Blah, blah, blah. This isn't a medical issue. This is a human rights issue. And so I don't think it's fair to put it in anything that has to do with medicine. It's whether we're talking about, and we did a show on this a month or so ago about how to take care of the elderly, or as people get older and can't take care of themselves. This is a human rights issue. Then we just don't do well with childcare and having babies in the United States. I mean, I know my entire adult life, when I've looked at it, the United States is like 20th in neonatal care. Yet we have some of the greatest hospitals, and everybody comes here to practice medicine, and we don't take care with prenatal care in the United States compared to other countries in the world. I mean, we don't rank in the top 20, or we didn't. I haven't looked in the last year or so. I mean, we might have made it up to 17th or something the last time I looked. And so to me, this isn't a socialized medicine. Like I'm going to say it one more time, 3 times, and right, people remember it. It's a human rights issue of how are we going to treat people that live in our country. And then if you talk about the book we just talked about in the barrios, you say, is it a privilege or not? We need more people. We don't have enough people in this country to fill all the jobs and to take care of everybody as they get older. So do we need to have a national push on having children? And so should we make it more available? Should it be is it a privilege or is it a right? Should we as a nation be saying, well, folks, we need more children. If you're not going to allow immigration to take place, we're going to need more humans here to work these jobs so that we can take care of, more people paying into Social Security and everything, because that's a whole nother can of worms. But just my 2 sense worth there real quickly.
Well, and if you have the people who are all about the family unit, right? They promote like healthy families, and you can go as traditional or as contemporary as you want with that. But from both sides, for me, it makes so much sense to say if you're going to promote healthy families in the United States, then give both parents, whether that's a mom and a dad or a mom and a mom or a dad and a dad or just a mom or however your family structure looks like, give those parents the time off with their newborn that the scientists and sociologists have shown is invaluable for the growth and development of not only that child, but the health and sustainability of that family unit over that child's lifetime. We've taken this totally in a different direction than the article meant to, but I think that it's missing that fundamental part. Like the fluff and the healthcare and the benefits for women is wonderful, but until we take care of this fundamental base of this issue, the rest of it's just the marshmallow on top. It's just the fluff.
I'm glad we took it this way. I mean, I think this is the interesting part of the conversation that unfortunately isn't had in typically a very civil way in most of mainstream media. And that's obviously part of what we try to do. The other thing that I knew going into this, and it is difficult, and it's definitely less difficult on this show than it would be on others. But, I'm mostly on the same page as you guys. I do struggle with it's not that some of these things I don't think are good answers. I just believe, as I do on some of the issues in this country, that we settle for good answers instead of great answers because working for the great answers is harder. And because there are good answers that we see working other places, so we go for those. And I'm not opposed to, and Lance knows this, I'm all for, I'd rather take a step now that's good than take no steps at all. But at the same time, I don't want the fact that we have taken a good step to then make us complacent toward finding a great step. Because I do think there's implications that come into play that we all have to think about with the government moves in this direction to mandate paid family leave. The government is making a statement, whether or not we want them to, that families are an important part of American society. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a conversation there in and of itself that what does it mean that the government's stating that now? And what does that communicate to people out there who don't have an interest in that? So I guess it's just, there's so many elements that it brings into play. When we talk about these things, I think too often we don't talk about the other implications that come into play. And that's why I like that we have that opportunity. Yeah,
you're right. But the government does that with every issie.
Right.
There are decisions.
And I hate that
the government, well, but I'm saying
that.
there are issues that the government, there are decisions that the government makes every day that don't interest me. That doesn't mean it's not a good decision.
Right.
Or a great decision. So just because you're making it sound like, well, and you probably didn't mean it, but it sounded like a little bit like, well, this would be a big, huge thing that would just change everything. I don't know about that, because if you're not interested in it, you're not interested in it. Like there are decisions, I don't know what every decision the government makes because some things don't interest me. The ones I pay attention, the decisions I pay attention to are on the things that interest me or that I think will affect the country in a greater mode. And that's probably where you're going, that this would affect more people. This would be a decision that would affect more people in the country than most of the decisions that the government makes. But the government's decision or lack of making a decision affects all of us on a daily basis. So the effect part to me isn't as important, because the fact that they will make a decision, by not making a decision, they're making a decision. And we're seeing the destruction of our society possibly because of their lack of making a decision.
And we can leave it with people on this. I guess to me, Lance, and I mean, you know this from our conversations and from the recent election that I was a part of. Part of what I have a problem with is it feels like so often that everything that gets proposed nowadays in government are silo issues. And I don't mean just people not thinking about the implications of what all it affects, but also proposing things that way. When we looked at fixing all these problems in Urbana, we tracked it all back to poverty and then said, if we take care of poverty, that'll fix all these other things, in the long term. Now we still have to do stuff in the short term, but I always feel like with so much of this stuff, and not that Band-Aids aren't important, right? Because we want to do something to help.
You have to
stuff
go,
now.
If you're not going forward, you're going back.
Right. But at the same time, I would like to see just generally more holistic approaches. And that's why I think, a hour-long program like we've got, a 40-minute program, is not enough, obviously, to get into this, but more conversations like this are necessary so that we can get to those implications. And moreover, what do we want to say about what it means to be an American today and what you do have the right to and don't have the right to? And I think that's, to me, what a lot of this comes back to, both as a male and a female, and just as an American.
Right.
And
just on that note, I just read an article where the local healthcare provider in our area is raising wages to $15 an hour in 2020. But
so, Lance, we've challenged people to tune in, right?
We do challenge people to tune in. I did that to my basketball team.
Yes.
They were most of them were amazed that I did a podcast. So I told them where to find it.
And what are the places
they can find it on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and anywhere else fine podcasts are found.
Special thanks to Olivia Jackson for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure we'll have you back more in the future. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.